Hey, sorry, you just caught me polishing my DMs.
Fucking hell.
Fucking hell.
That was so funny.
How are you?
I'm all right. I feel like a different person now that I've been called out as an alphabet person.
No,
I
I
didn't
had to
even know
look it
it.
up. I
You
had to
know
look
what?
it up. I was like, is that, I don't know, is that an insult?
Do
Is
you
it?
want to know what happened, right? Because of how naive I am, and I always think everybody's so fucking nice, I put a love heart to his comment because I didn't realise it was supposed to be derogatory.
Well,
So I put
I'm still not convinced of what it is. So,
So I put a love heart and I replied and I was like, I don't even know what any of that means with a laughing face. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, that's unkind.
that's not nice.
That's supposed to be unkind to me. And I
Uh,
phoned Josie up and I said, someone's been unkind on Instagram. I need you to come home and get them.
get him, please.
Funny.
Yeah, I know. The thing is, anyone that's like puts derogatory comments and things like that, I noticed they still look at a lot of our videos.
There was comments on all of our videos actually from that same person, but we've got a whole family of
Haven't we? Oh
listeners.
my
We've got a
goodness.
whole like worldwide nation on our side. So come at us with your derogatory comments because we've got an arsenal of loyal.
No, I just don't want the whole world coming at us.
Oh, oh
Yeah,
well.
no, I agree. They all our family had our backs.
Yeah.
Good times, and what a brilliant weekend we had for the pod for
What a
downloads.
what a fantastic weekend we had. So we
So many.
I'm assuming have got a lot of new listeners. So welcome aboard. Um
Welcome.
welcome aboard to our crazy podcast. Thank you for getting past the first episode, really. Because a lot of people go, oh, a
Yeah.
new podcast. I'll listen to the first one and go, oh, that's shit. I don't like it anymore. Obviously, it's going to be shit. It's the first one. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, thanks for seeing something in that first episode
And
and
realizing our pure professionalism that
absolutely,
is Sarah and Kate,
yeah,
Perplexing podcasts.
the A to
Professionals.
Z of podcasting, the complete alphabet.
The complete alphabet. We are alphabet people. People.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
if you are alphabet people, whether you are L, whether you are S, whether you are H, whether you are Z,
I don't know what they even are now. Honestly,
I don't know.
I'm such a rubbish alphabet person because I don't even know what they are.
No, I know. I didn't even know
I'm
what an
just
alphabet
me.
person was. So yeah,
Me
exactly.
either. I googled it.
Yeah. I never thought anyone would ever come at us for being gay. I didn't think that that's the world that we lived in anymore. So when that happened, I
No,
was like, oh, that must be a real nice thing to say. And then I was
that
like,
can't
wait
be
a
it.
minute.
Yeah. I'm just me, and Sarah is just Sarah. And also,
Just a
I'm saying
bunch of
that
pricks.
we're not just anything. Actually, I'm going to correct myself. We're not just anything. Sarah is not just Sarah. Sarah is Sarah. And that is something to
With
be
an
celebrated.
exclamation.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
Sarah, boom. Yeah.
Yeah. And Kate's Kate with a question mark.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Kate. Hmm.
Hmm.
Is she supposed to be like that? And everyone that knows me is like, yeah. I am no different to anyone, for anyone, with
Yeah.
anyone.
Yeah. Kate.
Yeah. Sarah and Kate's just be Sarah and Kate's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, should we crack on? Because we've actually got some shout outs. Our first shout out goes to Christian. And Christian, if you're listening, don't know if you are, thank you for subscribing. And Christian is a very up and knowledgeable about the Michael Crow case and was commenting about when people had questions about what repercussions the police had or what the boys received as compensation and things like that. He had all of the answers.
Nice.
More knowledgeable than I was actually, because I don't know what the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal is. I'm not very... No! I'm not very knowledgeable in terminology and court proceedings and things like that. Fucking flies straight over my head. So he sent a link with loads of information and I read it and it was pages and pages long, something like 62 pages or something, but it had so much information about the case and what happened to the boys afterwards and all the like claim that they received afterwards and stuff. So thanks, Christian.
Cool. Thanks, Christian.
Most important of all, he a new subscriber.
Yeah. Thanks, Christian. It means everything to us to have new subscribers because, you know, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I want to do this full time. I want to be able to put as much time into this as I can. And I just, at the moment, it's a bit frustrating because I don't get enough time to put into it. But if we could do this full time, this would be awesome.
Well, that leads us on to our second shout out, really, because Matt, he he donated to our Buy Me a Coffee page, and he said that
I got it. Mine's
got
right
it
here. Yeah, I've got mine. Thanks, Matt.
Beep, 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 beep. There's my letter of my alphabet.
Oh, this is just my soul. Black.
And Matt said in his donation, he left us a little compliment, and he said that he doesn't feel like people appreciate how much work we put into the podcast. And
that's so kind.
We do put so much effort into this podcast, and we have to fit that in around absolutely everything else. So
life,
yep.
Sorry, Sarah just got possessed again. Then
I don't really know what happened. But yeah, so thank you to everybody and for everybody's kind words as well, and for supporting us and backing us when people are douches.
Yes. We appreciate you guys. And if you want us to stick up for you at any point, let us know.
Yeah.
And we will.
Should we crack on with the random blams?
All right. Random blams. Go.
Right. This is a TikTok entitled Obvious Facts That Make Us Feel Stupid. Are you ready for these? Right?
Yeah.
Uppercase letters are called that because they could be found in the upper drawer of a printing press, and lowercase can be found in the lower drawer.
No!
That's why they're uppercase and lowercase.
No way!
Yeah!
That's something I've just never considered.
No, and this one, fuck me, when I heard this one, I felt a little bit sick inside because I was like, that can't be right. Everything that I know about life is wrong, right?
Huh.
Barcode scanners scan the white part and not the black.
Really?
I don't. This is just on TikTok. It could be a load of bullshit. I don't know.
Well, let us know.
I think that is true, though. I do think that is true.
That's mad.
Are you ready for the next one?
I'm ready.
1 billion is much larger than what you think. 1 million seconds is 11 days. 1 billion seconds is 31 years.
1 billion seconds.
Yeah, so 1 million seconds is 11 days. And 1 billion seconds is 31 years. So there's a massive difference.
That's huge difference.
Yeah.
I'll have to just sit and let that sink in.
Wait, you wait for this one.
33 years.
31 years.
31 years.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Right, you ready for this?
Yeah.
George Washington didn't know dinosaurs existed. How about that?
What?
How about that? I guess that they hadn't been unearthed yet. But that doesn't seem that long. That George Washington
doesn't, does it? Because we know about George Washington.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Just trying to find another one.
Can you imagine being the first person to discover like a dinosaur?
Yeah.
Being like,
why is this tooth so massive?
Yeah. Finding like the head of a T-Rex and then being like, shit, are there any more around?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And that's the end of one on there. But Josie said something to me the other day because she loves these sort of things.
Yeah.
And she said that she found one on there and it said something like, we, as people, we feel like our skeleton is inside us.
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
But actually, we are our brains. So we are actually inside our skeleton. Just let that sink in for a minute.
Well, I would, but my brain's very, very small. And
Inside your skeleton.
it's in there somewhere, but rattling around. Yeah, that's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everything that operates is inside.
Yeah.
Huh.
There you go.
Interesting.
Had like a week's worth of blams there.
Yeah. Well, my blam is not anywhere near as refined and pleasant as that. But my blam is about the word fuck.
So it's not fornicating under the King's
I'll tell
command,
you,
is it? All right.
So I was always told that the word fuck came from the acronym. It made up an acronym about fornication under the
command of the king. Yeah.
But it isn't. That's false.
No, it's not. That's why I thought the blam was going to be, and I was like, "That's wrong, Kate. Don't do it."
Yeah. So it isn't that. And it was actually, the word was first recorded in a dictionary in 1598, and it derived.
When a man stubbed his toe.
Yeah, and he was like, "Oh fuck." It derived from an old German word, which was ficken or fucken, meaning to strike or penetrate, which had the slang meaning to copulate. Oh. So there. So it comes from a German word, ficken / fucken. Fucken. Yeah. And it was shortened to fuck. And then we just took that and ran with it, especially on this podcast. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
It's all right. Random blams.
Done. What have you got for me today? Because I'm so excited.
I have got probably the strangest case that I've done to date. For me, anyway, I just kept thinking that it's just so bizarre. It's so strange that, yeah, it shows you well, I'm not going to give it away anyway, but so did you see the title of it?
No, actually, I'm very unobservant.
Well, very, very professional, but very unobservant.
Just couldn't have cared less.
Yeah, don't know. That didn't look, don't care. Just turn up.
For?
That's it. So you may think that when you see this title, that it's going to be a cute, fluffy episode, because the title is Mary Toft and her baby bunnies.
All right.
So it sounds very cute and fluffy. However, this is part
that's not what the podcast is it?
It's not what we do, is it?
No.
So this is my trigger warning. The episode is quite graphic in parts and a bit disgusting. I know Sarah will be all right with that, but I mean, I'm not. I was gagging in my mouth and all sorts when I was writing the notes for this. I'll be talking about parts about the birth process, blood, tissue, miscarriages, and some other things that listeners may find uncomfortable or upsetting. I'll try not to harp on too much about it, but it is pivotal to the story. If you think that you might struggle hearing this, please feel free to skip this episode. I'd rather you didn't. But if you feel that you need to, then do.
Bring it on.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's do it, yeah? Morning.
Morning.
Morning, morning, everyone.
Morning.
What a rainbowy alphabetical morning it is.
Absolutely.
Right. I've got a story for you today that is just I don't know how to put it into a genre, because it's not a murder, it's not a cryptid, it's not a mystery, it's just weird.
Perplexing.
It's perplexing. And I came across it and I thought, do you know what? Well, I've got to do this as an episode because I found the whole story just really bizarre and yeah, just perplexing. So
I don't know who I am sitting here in a bloody t-shirt.
who do you think you are?
Who do you
Wearing a
think I am?
t-shirt
I'll
in
have to put a
January,
jumper on soon, I reckon.
I reckon. Um, so this story sent me down a rabbit hole, no pun intended. It sent me down a rabbit hole looking at the medical industry in like the 1700s in
Oh.
England anyway. And honestly, it's so bizarre. We're going to have to do more stories on it because honestly, it just blew my mind. And
Josie's
then,
been asking me to do stories on different like old treatments of things, like what they used to treat diabetes with and
yeah,
what they used to treat like
well,
autism and things like that
this
with. And
this kind of goes down that route, like the fact that I was finding out that they used to treat like simple things like toothache and things like that. They used to treat that with electrocution, like not even like shock therapy, but like proper electrocution. They used to proper like fry people
oh
because they had toothache. It's just crazy. And we're so lucky to live in the age that we do now,
yeah,
where we're like, oh, I've got a bit of a toothache. I'll take myself off to the dentist and get it sorted. And yeah, not in 1726. So, on that note, the year was 1726. The place was Godalming in Surrey in the UK. So, not massively far from us, but then we're in the UK. So, nothing's massively far for
yeah.
us. Everything's pretty much like, oh,
Everything's a car
yeah,
journey.
just down the road. And this story is about a lady named Mary Toft. When Mary was about 18 years old, she met Joshua, and Joshua was a cloth worker, and his family had all worked in the wool trade that went back like generations and generations. And while Joshua's family made a success of this industry, Joshua wasn't too skilled, so he wasn't particularly good at it. So he found it very difficult to make anything of himself in that industry. He wasn't particularly great at his job. He wasn't good at bringing home money, bringing home the bacon. Yeah, so basically he was shit at being a provider, working in the cloth trade. But as it was, Joshua and Mary met, they fell in love, and they got married. In 1723, the couple had had their first child, a daughter who they named Anne. While she was still only a baby, Anne contracted smallpox and passed away. Just 1 year after Anne's death, the couple gave birth to a son, and they called him James. Joshua, although he was pleased to be a dad, he was very much in a state of pure panic because he could sort of barely provide for him and Mary. And now they had James, and babies need a lot. So I think he was just panicking about having three mouths to feed when he was sort of barely able to feed the two of them. So they made a plan, and Mary said, listen, I'm going to go to work as well, see if I can earn a few pennies, get some food in, that sort of thing. So she began working as a farm labourer. So she would work long hours. She would be out in the field, picking crops, planting crops, things like that. In the spring of 1726, Mary and Joshua found that they were pregnant again. And they were excited, but again, they were apprehensive about the birth. A few months into Mary's pregnancy, she began to feel very unwell, and they kind of felt that possibly they would be facing another miscarriage. But Mary said, I need to keep working. We need the money. So I'm going to stay at my job. So although she was pregnant, she still went out, worked in the fields. And one particular day, she was stood in the field where she was working, and she saw many, many, many bunnies all running around, skipping around in the field as bunnies do. And she said she felt mesmerized by these bunnies. She just stood there watching them all, and there seemed to be like hundreds of these bunnies all flying around. And as she stood there, she thought, do you know what? This is a good food source. I should see if I can catch some of these bunnies. And then we've got meat and we can feed the family and it will be good sustenance. And she tried to catch one, but she was just way too slow. Bunnies are fast AF.
Hippity hoppity.
Hippity hoppity, super fast, like lightning bunnies. So she wasn't able to catch one. And later that night, as she slept, she began to have really vivid dreams of hundreds and hundreds of bunnies all around her. She could feel their fur as they jumped over her and snuggled up against her. And she was just in this bunny paradise where there was just all these bunnies all over her. And the next night she had the same dream, and the next night she had the same dream, and she just kept like obsessing over bunnies. And one morning she woke up and she said to Joshua, she said, do you know what? I don't know whether it's because I'm pregnant or I just keep seeing all these rabbits at work and I have dreams about them, but I am craving rabbit meat. Really, I need rabbit meat. And Joshua thought, yeah, do you know what? I love Mary. I want the baby to be healthy and well. She needs proper nutrition. I'll see if I can try and source some rabbit meat. But at this time in the 1700s, rabbit meat was really like a rich man's meat. Mm-hmm. So it was, to buy it, it was quite pricey. Which obviously Joshua didn't have the money to go out and be buying rabbits to cook for dinner. So he set about trying to catch them and putting out traps, building traps, to see if he could get them. But yeah, so about 4 months after this, so Mary was considerably pregnant by this point. She felt very unwell, like very, very unwell. She was suffering intense abdominal pains. And sadly, all these months into the pregnancy, Mary unfortunately had another miscarriage. And Anne Toft, who was Mary's mother-in-law, Joshua's mum, she was actually a midwife, and she was able to be there for Mary and Joshua, and she was able to help Mary see through the miscarriage. So because she did this, there was actually no need for Mary to actually go and see a doctor. Midwives were capable of helping ladies through miscarriages and doing everything that needed to be done. And when Anne removed the baby, she found that the baby actually didn't look like a baby at all. What she removed was a large piece of what looked like bloody tissue, and it was about a foot long. She said it was, in her words, it was about as big as her arm. Which obviously they were shocked about. Anne was very confused. She had witnessed and assisted with many births and many miscarriages, but she had never seen anything like this before. And she said that it didn't even look like an undeveloped baby. It just looked like a big lump of tissue. Many days after this, Mary continued to lose quite a lot of blood. Her belly was distended and she was in a lot of pain and discomfort. And this is fairly usual. It's fairly common after a miscarriage, particularly one that's so far into the pregnancy. And was, there for Mary during this whole time. September 27th, a neighbour of Mary and Joshua's heard Mary screaming, like properly screaming the house down, and she went running. And when she got to Mary's place, she found Mary thrashing around in pain, grasping at her stomach. The neighbour was in a panic and said she would run for help. But before she could, Mary threw her legs open like she was giving birth. I had to reword this many times because I couldn't think of a nice way to say it. But she threw her legs open and she begged her neighbour to help her. Help me, help me. Her neighbour could see something emerging from Mary's area. Her noo-noo.
You can say vagina.
I don't like the word vagina. I don't like the word. What should we call it? Let's set a standard now, because there's going to be more speakings about Mary's area.
All right. Well, I'd be quite happy to say vagina, but if that's not on your palette, then you
I've reworded a lot of this because I wrote it out and I thought I'm not saying that.
All right, we're all adults.
I just don't like it. I'm gonna call it a noo-noo.
All right, like a child.
Yeah. So her neighbour could see something emerging from Mary's noo-noo. As the neighbour looked on in horror, amongst the blood that was now flowing out everywhere, she took hold of what she assumed would be a baby. And she thought Mary was like just giving birth. But this was no baby, certainly not a human baby. It was the bloody, disfigured body of a cat.
What?
You heard. Could make a joke about it, but I'm not going to. Everyone was horrified. They could not understand what the hell was happening. Mary and Joshua were scared and obviously disturbed. So they decided to send this cat's body off to an expert at the time to get some answers, because they were honestly like, A, she wasn't pregnant. B, she's suddenly got really, really ill. And then C, something's come out of a noo-noo is like a mangled, disfigured cat. So they were like, what the hell's going on? And obviously,
was it furry? Did it have fur?
It kind of had a lot of the sort of fur and skin like off of it, like it had been kind of ripped. It was mangled, so you couldn't really tell. But this is 1726.
Yeah.
That you've got to remember, this is at a time where
people gave birth to cats.
There was a lot of things that weren't discovered. Do you know what I mean? So they didn't know if something like this was actually possible. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's the time, where people thought there were witches and there was witchcraft going on. Had she been cursed?
Yeah.
To, bear kittens. They didn't know. So they wanted some answers. They wanted to find out what was happening. So there was a man called Mr. John Howard, and he was a well-known and well-respected obstetrician. I looked up an obstetrician. An obstetrician is a doctor who specializes in the care during pregnancy, labor, and after the birth. So like a man, doctor, midwife kind. I'm only saying man because then it was just men. There weren't women doctors. And something else that I found mind-blowing was back in those days, doctors and surgeons weren't required to go to medical school.
No, that was the case in
Bonkers.
the Ripper. The coroner
yes
wasn't
not
medically trained.
Exactly. And this is why when I refer to him as Mr. Howard, I'm not calling him Dr. Howard because he actually wasn't. But yeah, they weren't required to go to medical school. Their findings were based on how well they argued their case.
Right.
Which to me was mind-blowing. If you could go into court and you could say, I think that it is possible for women to give birth to cats because this. If you made a compelling enough argument, that became fact. Done. Crazy. When Mr. Howard got the news about Mary giving birth to a cat, he was perplexed. He couldn't wait to receive the cat's body to investigate it and check out this miracle birth or new discovery. His thinking was that because this was the age of like new discoveries, people discovering all these miraculous things, he thought, this is it. This is my shot. This is where I'm going to be the first doctor to report on a woman giving birth to a cat, and I'll go down in the history records. This will be great for me. And he also thought maybe it is possible for women to recreate with animals. So either way, Mr. Howard wanted to either prove or disprove Mary's story. Mr. Howard decided to set on his way to go and see Mary. When he arrived in Godalming, Anne Toft, who was Joshua's mother, Mary's mother-in-law, brought more pieces of the cat out. And she said Mary had kind of birthed these parts overnight. And Mr. Howard had already received the main body of the cat that had first come out. So he'd already kind of looked that over, which is why he went to Godalming. Mr. Howard said, I just need to have an ask around, see, I need to speak to your neighbour because your neighbour was there. So he went to see Mary's neighbour who had been there. And he told Mary that he couldn't just believe everyone's word about this because the neighbour was like, yep, I was there. I saw it come out. I knew, it was bloody and mangled, but it was definitely the body of a cat. So Mr. Howard was like, I still can't get my head around it. So he told Mary that he needed to be present when she delivered the head because the body of the cat that she delivered was headless. And he said, if I can be here when you actually deliver the head, then that'll be proof enough for me because, it's got to have a head. So he did kind of wait around for a bit, but nothing appeared. So by this point, he sort of thought, I'm gonna have to head home. And he lived in Guildford, so he was like, I'm gonna have to go home. I can't wait around. There's no head appearing. I need to be getting on. So he returned home. 2 weeks later, he received news that Mary had given birth to an animal jawbone. So when he thought a jawbone, he rushed back to Godalming and he found Mary straddled on the bed with a torrent of blood gushing out of her. 2 more pieces of bone came out with screams from Mary. She was clearly in a huge amount of pain. Mr. Howard took these bone fragments, and he started sort of putting them together. As she was screaming, something would come out. He'd clear off the blood from the piece that had just come out, and he'd start putting them together.
What
And
a fun jigsaw puzzle.
I know. I mean, I love doing jigsaws like that. Oh, yeah. So he started putting it all together, and when he'd sort of put everything together, he found that Mary had just delivered the head of a rabbit. Mr. Howard was now convinced that Mary was telling the truth, and she was, in fact, giving birth to animals, or at least parts of them. By November that year, Mary was delivering an entire rabbit in pieces, but what made up an entire rabbit every 48 hours. After her delivery of her
Why
ninth...
wasn't she dead?
Yeah, I know. Well, God knows. After her delivery of her ninth baby, I mean her ninth bunny, Mr. Howard moved Mary to his home in Guildford so he could keep a closer eye on her, because he was like, this is crazy. She's having a bunny like every other day. Every other day she was popping one out. So he was like, this is going to be the making of me. I need to follow this with closer examinations and such. Mr. Howard covered all expenses for Mary. He also paid costs to Joshua and their son James, because he wanted them all there. He wanted to look after them. You know, this was going to be the making of him. So it got to the point where Mary was delivering pieces of rabbits every day. So every day she would be screaming and writhing. There was lots of blood. There was lots of tissue coming out. And there was also the presence of amniotic fluid, which amniotic fluid is only something that you produce out of your new when you're pregnant, when you're having a baby. It's something that protects the baby. They examined Mary and found that she was also having contractions. So Mr. Howard began writing to lots and lots of other physicians and such about his findings. And on October 22nd, 1726, the British Journal heard of Mary's story, and they printed the story, and everyone went mad for it. It went viral. Everyone was freaking out about it. They were amazed that there was this woman who was actually giving birth to animals, and she was the talk of London overnight. She was, this miracle woman who could reproduce rabbits. Mad. Even King George heard about Mary as well, and he was fascinated. So this is King George I. He heard about Mary. He was spellbound by her story, and he said, I'm going to get some scientists of my own to go and check out this bunny woman. So he ordered a scientist called Samuel Molyneux. So I'm just going to refer to him as Samuel. And the Royal Court's autonomist, Nathaniel St. André, and I'll just call him Nathaniel. And he ordered Samuel and Nathaniel to go and see Mary. And he was like, see what you can make of it, because I can't believe there's some woman in Godalming that is actually giving birth to rabbits. That's nuts. So he sent him off. And Nathaniel was in the process of proving himself in the medical world. So he was overwhelmed and overjoyed and all the rest of the overs. And he couldn't wait to go and be included in this amazing discovery. So on November 19th, 1726, Nathaniel and Samuel arrived at Mr. Howard's house in Guildford to visit with Mary and to examine her. And they were just in time for the beautiful birth of bunny number 15. And when Nathaniel saw the top half of this bunny appearing from Mary's new, he knew that this was no like fraud. He was just like, all right, I'm here, I'm looking at it, and it's coming right out. That's amazing. So he was overjoyed. He was absolutely astounded at the fact that he was witnessing a woman giving birth to a bunny. And again, I would like to point out that these bunnies were not whole. They were like ripped apart, mangled. Some of them were missing like jaw bones. Some were missing the actual skin. Yeah, pretty rank. And because of this bunny number 15, because it was like fucked up, they could clearly see that the bunny had like lungs, and you could see it was the top half of the bunny. So you could see that the lungs were kind of hanging out the back of this half of bunny. So Nathaniel took this half a bunny and he dissected it, and he wanted to get a much closer, detailed inspection of it. And he removed the lungs from the rest of the bunny, and he placed these lungs in a bowl of water. And he found that the lungs floated to the top of the water, which meant at some point that these lungs had had air in them. And which meant at some point the bunny would have breathed air. So at this time in the 1700s, they would use this as an experiment with stillborn babies. So they would put the stillborn babies' lungs in water and see if they floated or whether they sunk. If it sunk, if the lungs sunk, then it meant that the baby had never breathed air, and it meant that the baby had passed away in the womb. So it never actually taken a first breath. If the lungs floated to the top, it meant that the baby had died after it had been born, so it had already taken a breath. But even though this experiment made sense, Mary giving birth to animals didn't. And he said that this experiment actually meant nothing, as the bunny, like Mary, did not adhere to the laws of physics. Nathaniel and crew, over the following hours, waited patiently for the rest of the bunny to emerge. Eventually, the rest of the bunny was born. Let the record show this was the entire lower half of said bunny. When Nathaniel and Samuel got the lower half, they began dissecting and examining the lower half of the bunny. They discovered poop in the bunny's rectum, which meant the bunny would have eaten at some point, as well as breathed air. Nathaniel said, "Pish posh, this is a miracle." And again, it defies the laws of physics. Move on. So when they looked over the original birth animal, the cat, they found that the cat was missing its liver, and the cat's spine they thought was that of an eel. So all three men, Nathaniel, Samuel, and Mr. Howard, said that this miracle of Mary giving birth to these sort of mutant animals, it meant that this miracle was making Mary's body a kind of mishmash of like different animals, and it was kind of making these mutant creatures. And that's all it was. Everything that Mary produced, everything that Mary was doing, it was all outside the law of physics. So move on. In their notes, they also noted that there was now little bleeding. It seemed to be, rather than sort of gushes of blood that was coming out, there was still bleeding, but it was, you could just kind of wipe it up. It wasn't, like they weren't mopping the floors and all that like they were before. And there was now no presence of amniotic fluid anymore. And they also noted that on examination, Mary's cervix was now closed. So for those that don't know, a woman's cervix only opens during childbirth for the baby to come out or in preparation of the baby coming out. And Mary's was closed. This puzzled them all, but they said yet again, move on. It doesn't operate under normal laws of physics. Move on. They examined Mary's birth canal and they found it to be empty. However, just hours later, Mary went and had another bunny, which convinced them this is real. We searched her birth canal and it was empty. And now she's had another bunny. It's real. It's real. The bunny that she had could only have come from her womb because, like I said, they've searched the birth canal. So that was that. Job done. Obviously, they weren't able. They didn't have ultrasounds. They didn't have sonograms. Nothing like that. So they were unable to check anything further than like Mary's cervix. But so armed with all this information, Samuel and Nathaniel headed straight back to the king to report. And they stated to the king, look, man, this not direct quote. They were like, listen, dude, this is real. We've got no doubt in our minds this is real. This woman is giving birth to rabbits, and we saw it with our own eyes. Here's the evidence that we brought back with us. And then they dumped all these rabbit bits in front of the king and said, get a load of this shit. Again, not direct quote. But they declared Mary as a medical marvel. And King George wanted to know how. He said, all right, I believe you that you're saying that this is fact and this is happening and this woman is able to birth rabbits. I get that. But I need to know how. Like, there's not enough information for me. So the whole world were giving their 2 cents as well. Some were saying that Mary was involved in bestiality, and that at some point she had fornicated or copulated with a bunny and a cat.
/eel.
/eel, yeah. And just a side note on this, bestiality was seen as a disgrace and it was thought of to be complete scusties.
Is that not still the case?
But it wasn't a crime. Bestiality was only outlawed in the UK in 2004.
Oh. Oh dear.
I know. So 2004, very, very recent. Up until then, it was just thought of as like, well, it's just scusties. You don't do that. You know, nice people don't do that. But now it's actually listed as a crime.
Well, it's the same as when we did the monster in the morgue.
Yes.
That necrophilia is not a punishable crime, and that astounded me.
That is actually...
It's scusties. That's what they said, but it's not a crime.
No, that's worse than scusties. That's like properly disgusting.
Yeah.
I mean, so is bestiality, but I mean, what is more disgusting is the fact that that is not a crime. It's not listed as crime. That's awful.
Yep.
But yeah, so if any of you are thinking of having scusties with animals, it's actually against the law. Although I need to check that in America. Oh. I only used it up for the UK. I'm going to do that as my blam on the next episode.
All right.
I'll look it up. If you want to know the answer, you're going to have to subscribe because we're doing a blam next. Right. So, yeah, and moving on from bestiality. So at this point, they listed Mary's condition. Are you ready for this? It's great. It's great. Maternal imagination.
All right.
There was a lot of women in the 1700s that were put into a category of they're suffering with maternal imagination. So, and this went on
phantom pregnancy.
Not really phantom, but for a couple of centuries, it was thought that if a woman saw something that made a big impression on her, something that stirred her emotions, that it would imprint on the fetus that she had inside of her, and it would alter it. And the whole thing was titled as maternal imagination. So basically, people were saying that if you, I don't know, if you saw a herd of elephants, if a pregnant woman saw a herd of elephants and she was very like moved by it, or, you know, affected by it emotionally, it would imprint on the babies, and the baby would then be born with a trunk.
Right.
You know, or the baby would be born with, you know, a woman would be pregnant and she would give birth to her baby, and the baby would have like webbed feet and webbed fingers and things like that, and they would say she's suffered, or she's suffering with maternal imagination, and she must have seen like some frogs. And then that's given them, they didn't think it was a medical reason why a baby would be born with like webbed feet and webbed fingers. They assumed that the medical change happened because she had maternal imagination, and she'd seen a frog that had webbed feet and it had imprinted on the baby.
I understand.
Mad, mad, mad.
So were there other cases of this for them to have come up with this maternal imagination? There must have been other cases of children being, or pregnancies that were birthed with animal features or something, for them to come up with that diagnosis.
No, it was literally like what I just said. So babies would be born with webbed fingers, or
but not like with a trunk or anything.
No, not like things that looked so much like a cat. But they put it into that category, and they said, well, for her to have a baby that looks like a cat or looks like a bunny, then she's suffering with that, and that's what it is. Because, you know, they said to Mary, tell us a little bit about you, other than, you know, popping out bunnies. What do you do? Where do you spend like your days and that? Are you at home and that? And she was like, no, I work in the fields. And they were like, is there a lot of rabbits there? And she was like, yeah, shit ton. And they were like, that's what it is. She's seen a load of rabbits and now she's having rabbits. So yeah, King George wasn't convinced of this. He was like, I don't know. I still don't know if I believe it. So he got a German surgeon who was like renowned for being a man of science. He would have been, if you think of like Mr. Howard as like me, and this German surgeon is more Sarah. They're like, yeah, don't know. So he was proper like skeptical. He was like, I've seen no evidence that a human can give birth to animals or anything like that. He was known as a total skeptic. So King George said, right, I want you to come and examine Mary and report your findings back to me, because I think you're going to be less easy to sway than like Howard and Nathaniel and Samuel and all that. I sent them off and they've come back and they're like, yeah, it's true. And he was like, So this German surgeon's name was Cyriacus Ahlers. So I'm going to call him Cyriacus. So Cyriacus did not believe that Mary was giving birth to animals. So his plan was to go along with the story, kind of, you know, be one of the guys and be like, yeah, this is amazing, I can't believe it. Because then he thought they would be less on guard, and they would easily give him like information. They would let him in the room when Mary was giving birth and all that. So he was like, yeah, no, I totally believe it. But he first noticed when he got to Mr. Howard's, where Mary was, he did an examination and he noticed that, in fact, there was now hardly any blood at all. There was no amniotic fluid whatsoever. She didn't have a swollen tummy. She wasn't producing milk, nothing. And it never really sat well with him that the animals that she was giving birth to were always in pieces. They were never actually like whole, because he was thinking,
How would they break up in the womb?
yeah, she's able to have like a whole baby because she's got a son. Why would she not be able to have like a whole rabbit? Because rabbits are tiny, like, especially wild rabbits. They're really small. So it never really sat well with him as to why she wasn't actually able to give birth to a whole rabbit. So when Mary next sort of went into labour, Cyriacus put his hand into Mary's area to do an examination, and he felt something there, and he felt that something was coming out. But as he wasn't an obstetrician, he accidentally pushed it further into Mary, and Mary howled in agony. She screeched and screamed the house down. Mr. Howard said, that's enough. Stop. You're going to kill her. And he said, from now on, I'll do it because I am an obstetrician.
No touchies.
Yeah, no touchies. But this kind of made Cyriacus more suspect. He was like, I mean, it is weird. I did feel something coming out, but like Mr. Howard was like properly like on my case. Like, I don't know. November 26th, Cyriacus went back to London to report to the king. He told the king that he felt certain that this was a hoax. He reported that after examining the bunnies, and Mr. Howard telling him that Mary's contractions and convulsions were the reason that these bunnies were like ripped apart, because they were saying she was contracting so badly and convulsing around on the bed in pain, that it was ripping these bunnies apart, and that's why she was having them in pieces. He said, I just don't think it's true. I really don't. He'd brought back some of the pieces of bunny to kind of examine and do experiments on, things like that. And he found that when he had two halves of the bunnies and he kind of put them together, he said, it's my opinion that these bunnies have been cut in half rather than ripped apart. So meanwhile, Nathaniel heard about Cyriacus' report to the king, and he feared for his own reputation. He thought, oh mate, if this comes out, this is like a hoax, or the king is convinced that it's a hoax, like my reputation is going to go right down the pan. Because Nathaniel had gone public with his findings, and he said that, it was unequivocally real. Like, this is fact. There's a woman here. She's given birth to animals. I've examined her. I've been present at the birth. This is real. And if it came out that Mary was a faker, he going to
be red-faced.
He's going to be ruined, mate. So he said, right, I'm gonna examine Mary again, because I'm nervous now that everyone's going to think this is a hoax. When he was there and he was with Mary and he was observing her and he was examining her, Mary produced a mucous membrane. Oh, I hate the word mucus. And this was actually a first for Mary. She'd always delivered like parts of animals and things like that, but she'd never produced like a membrane that was like full of mucus and blah. And the three men, Samuel, Nathaniel, Mr. Howard, they were like, oh, she's just birthed a placenta. So they all gave a sigh of relief, and they were like, oh, thank God.
Done.
Mary is pregnant after all. She was being truthful. That's great. Our professions are safe. Reports, our reputations. Phew. On a different turn of events, Mary had started to become deathly ill by this point. She was.
I should fucking imagine so.
She was quite clearly in a massive amount of pain. She looked grey. She looked withdrawn. And not surprisingly, she had begun to pass blood and mucus when she went for a tinkle. We know that she was passing blood and mucus when she had a tinkle because the doctors found it in her tinkle samples. Her heart rate was erratic. The doctors knew that Mary had a serious infection. She was displaying all the signs of a really, really serious infection. But they weren't there to treat Mary. They were there to witness the rabbits being born. So they just said, well, we haven't really got time to worry about Mary and what she's doing. We're down the business end looking at what's coming out, what's being delivered next. And they were just desperate to validate their miraculous discovery and immortalize themselves in the history books for being the doctors to discover the woman who birthed bunnies. But while they were fantasizing about being famous, Mary was actually on the brink of dying. Fearing that Mary could die, Nathaniel legged it back to London so that he could convince the king that it was true and, there was no doubt about it. We need to go in the history books now, quickly, because, if she kicks the bucket, it's going to make it difficult for us. So Nathaniel, in front of the king's audience, dissected one of Mary's bunnies, showing that the bunny's organs were small like that of a baby bunny and certainly not an adult bunny. He also presented the mucus-like placenta, stating that she would only have produced the placenta if she was indeed pregnant to produce nutrients for the baby. And everyone was convinced. Everyone was like, Nathaniel, that's great. That's amazing that you've discovered that. So Nathaniel, Samuel, and Mr. Howard were famous at last. They had been vindicated. They were the talk of the town. Headlines: the doctors that discovered the woman who birthed bunnies, end quote. That's not an actual headline. Meanwhile, Mary was very near death. And Cyriacus was seething with rage. He knew that Mary was a fraud. These Nathaniel, Samuel, and Mr. Howard had just stood in front of the whole world at the King's Court and said, it's absolutely true. Cyriacus was like, no, mate, you can't be doing that. So he spoke to the king and he was like, don't fall for it. There is no possible way that this woman is giving birth to bunnies. So the king said, yeah, I'm not convinced, to be honest. So we're going to hire Sir Richard Manningham. So Sir Richard and Nathaniel arrived at Mr. Howard's place to see Mary. Sir Richard examined Mary and concluded that Mary was absolutely, categorically not pregnant. But she did have a hard, lump that he felt was present in her right fallopian tube. And he thought, I need to investigate further. The two men waited for Mary to produce another bunny. And they waited, and they waited, and they waited for hours on end, but nothing. Eventually, they got fed up and they said, let's go to the pub. So both of them said, we're sick of sitting there for hours and hours and hours just staring at Mary and her area, waiting for something to happen, and it's not. So they said, right, let's go to the pub. So they did. And they went along to the local inn for some light refreshment. And then, blam! Mary had another baby. Mr. Howard burst into the inn where the two doctors were, and he showed them. She's had another baby. Here it is. While you were at the pub, She had a baby. It's a bunny. There you go. But it wasn't really a bunny. It was a gross, slimy organ type looking thing. And Mr. Howard said she hasn't had another bunny, but she gave birth to another placenta. So something's happening. Sir Richard was fuming. He'd come all this way to see Mary give birth to something that wasn't a human baby. And the second that he went to the pub, boom, she had something. So he was fuming. He was so angry. So he screamed at Howard and said, like, why the fuck didn't you come and get me when you knew that something was happening? Or like words to that effect. He also like told the others that in his mind, this placenta that Mr. Howard was saying, he said to me, it looks like a pig's bladder. It doesn't look like a placenta to me. It looks like a pig's bladder. And he did not believe that it was anything like a placenta at all. Mary was distraught. She was gutted that after everything she'd been through, all these tests, hands going up her, examinations, everything that she'd endured, that she was still being treated like a fraud. Sir Richard stayed with Mary for the whole remainder of his trip, but nothing. She didn't produce anything. Mary said that she was experiencing contractions, but then after like a couple of hours, nothing would happen. So eventually Sir Richard was like, fraud, tick, and he headed back to London. King George wanted more and more doctors and scientists to visit Mary and examine Mary in an attempt to find out what was happening and secure some absolute proof either way. One of these doctors was James Douglas, who was a famous anatomist whose speciality was women's pelvic organs. And James, like Sir Richard, also thought this was a load of old shit. So he said, I'm going to stay with Mary every second of the day and night until I see something with my own eyes. I need to see her actually giving birth to a bunny. And then as soon as she does, I'm going to do a full examination. He started with a full examination of Mary and declared that her contractions were not birth contractions. They were just muscle contractions that Mary could be doing herself. So that was that. After several days of no bunny births, Mr. Howard and Nathaniel couldn't understand what was going on. They were like, this is ridiculous. Mary's been popping out bunnies consistently up until now. Every 48 hours, we had a whole bunny. Now nothing. And this made everyone nervous because they were like, if she's only not giving birth because everyone's sitting there watching her, that don't make sense. So everyone started getting a bit nervous. Sir Richard and James Douglas were pretty much like ready. You know, they thought, yeah, we suspected this would be the case. We think it's a hoax. Mr. Howard and Nathaniel begged for more time. They were like, no, don't go back to the king and say that it's confirmed that this is a hoax. Just give us a bit more time to prove our findings. So Sir Richard and James Douglas thought, fine, you got it. But if we don't get some absolute proof soon, then blam, it's a scam. But although they gave him a bit more time, they sort of thought, do you know what? We're going to have a little bit more time to prove that it's a hoax as well. So they got a detective involved to work out if it was a scam, like how was this all being done? What was actually going on? So the detective headed to Guildford and he questioned some people that were in that area that sort of knew about Mary, some that didn't know about Mary, all of that. But he was savvy, this detective. And he went to some rabbit sellers and he thought, I'm going to question them. So I went to the rabbit sellers and he said, you know, Joshua Toft. He looks like this. Look, and they went, yeah. I know him. Yeah, wife
He's a
Mary.
regular.
He's a reg. Yeah, and that's pretty much what they said. They went, oh yeah, he's. I know him well. He comes here all the time and buys rabbits. The detective was like, does he now? Interesting. So he then shot back to Joshua, and he was like, you've been buying rabbits. What have you been doing with them? And Joshua said, well, Mary likes to eat rabbit meat. So she has, like, ever since this whole thing started, she's been craving rabbit meat. And he was like, oh, so she's been eating them. And he went, yeah, we all have. And he was like, okay, interesting. So you've been staying at Mr. Howard's house, and Mr. Howard's house has a cook. So he thought, I'm going to go speak to her. So he did. So he went along and he spoke to the cook at the house. And she said, this is not a direct quote, but this is how I've got it in my mind. She said, no, sir, I ain't never prepared no rabbit meat for Mary. Honest, governor. And he thought, now I've got her. Meanwhile, this was happening. Mary had begun to have seizures, and she was very, very, very ill now. One of the seizures actually ended up where Mary was unconscious for quite a long time. And they were getting worse and worse by the day. December 4th, 1726, Mary was screaming in agony, writhing around. She was a complete sweaty mess. So, being good doctors, you'd think at this point they would help Mary. But nope. They were just all down that end of Mary, staring, waiting to see what was going to come out. Would it be something? I mean, she's really writhing in pain now. Is it going to be is it going to be a dog? Are we going to get delivery of some sort of hippo? Who knows? They waited and waited, but nothing. And eventually Mary calmed down and passed out. The detective met with the houseboy at Mr. Howard's house, and he questioned him. And the houseboy told the detective that Mary would often offer him money to go out and find a small bunny and bring it back to her. Blam! This was it. The proof of fraud that he needed. So the houseboy's been taking small bunnies, dead, alive, didn't matter, taking it. And Mary was like, shh, keep it quiet. So the detective was like, that's it. We've got our proof. So he took that information to the justice of the peace. And the justice of the peace arrived at the house that very night, and Mary was nicked, as ill as she was, near death's door. She got arrested. The officials told Mary that if she didn't confess, that they would do horrible and painful tests on her until, they found the truth for themselves. So on December 8th, Mary confessed it was all a hoax. She told them that her mother-in-law had started the whole thing. So Anne Toft, she was the instigator in this. Her and her son Joshua would go out and catch rabbits when they could. And she specified, make them as small as possible, please. Sometimes they couldn't find baby rabbits, so they would have to get adult rabbits and literally pull them apart or cut them apart. And then they would, well, I say they, Anne Toft, their mother-in-law, would shove them into Mary's area. And and then they would wait until she could physically push them out. But these were sharp bones sticking out, things like that, and it would cut Mary, and that's why she would often bleed so much. Near the beginning of it was more convincing, let's say. I won't say better or easier. It was more convincing because obviously Mary had recently suffered a miscarriage, so there was a lot of trauma in her body anyway. Then when Mr. Howard got involved as well. So he would then go out and get bunny parts and things like that because he wanted this to be his miracle discovery. Mr. Howard would surgically insert the bunny parts into Mary and then tell her that she had to contract and push and wiggle around and writhe and things like that to try and get them out. many people, and I believe that this happened to give the family fame and fortune. They were so poor, and Joshua could not provide for his family, so his mum got involved and said, I know what to do. You need to make this miracle, this big scandal. But it severely backfired on the whole family, as they actually never got really any money at all for this. They didn't get the fame and fortune that they thought. And poor Mary went through so much pain for this. The plan being created in the mind of Anne Toft. Mary had a severe infection due to the fact that she was having, on a daily basis, parts of dead animals being put into her. Antibiotics hadn't been invented yet. But in actual fact, in the only miracle that happened with this is that Mary actually didn't die of an infection. She just kind of
crazy. It's
mad, isn't it? She just kind of got over it on her own. However, she did go to prison. She was still famous, and instead of being famous for miracle births, she was famous for scamming the king, and the king didn't appreciate this. He wasn't about it, and there would be like hundreds of people would gather outside the prison where Mary was, because they were like, she's in there. So in order to stop all these people gathering outside the prison to get a glimpse of Mary or shout to her or something like that, the king ordered for Mary to be released in the hope that it would just die down and it would go away. What happened to Nathaniel? Unfortunately, he had published a paper about this on December 3rd. So this was just 5 days before Mary's confession. So he produced this paper that was like, the proof. Here's the proof. It's a miracle. And I was there and I saw it. And it was titled A Short Narrative of an Extraordinary Delivery of Rabbits. And in it, he staked his reputation on it. 5 days later, Mary confessed he was ruined. He swore he would never eat rabbit again. He actually died in 1776 at the age of 96. Cyriacus published a book on the hoax, exposing the incompetence of Nathaniel and Mr. Howard. Samuel Molinois died in 1929, so just a few years later, he passed away. Mr. Howard, who actually had a hand in this, no pun intended. Yeah. He was put before a judge and he was fined £800, which in today's money would equate to about £150,000. And he died in 1755. Mary Toft was released from prison in April 8th, 1727. So she only spent a short while in prison, but she was very ill while she was in prison. In February 1728, she gave birth again, but not to a bunny or a cat. She gave birth to a baby girl, human. And
how was her insides not absolutely destroyed?
Well, maybe they were. I don't know. She must have been pretty hardcore, Mary Toft, to have endured all that.
And not like even any fluids or antibiotics.
Yeah. Having all these
dead animals shoved up her.
Yeah, and like bones, like jaw bones and things like that. So yeah, so the baby girl that she had, February 1728, they called her Elizabeth. And in the registry, I found this like interesting as well. In the registry of Elizabeth's birth, it says, Mary Toft gave birth to a girl that's called Elizabeth Toft. Oh, that's difficult for me to say. And it says, first noted, first child after pretending rabbit breeding. That's mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mary Toft passed away in 1763. And there was a verse named after Mary Toft, or created because of Mary Toft, and her bunny hoax. And it goes like this: most true it is, I dare to say, since the days of Eve, the weakest woman sometimes may the wisest man deceive. The end.
Oh,
It's mad.
that was
Mad.
disgusting. That was so disgusting.
It
I
was
am
so disgusting.
absolutely fine with blood and gore and
Yeah,
bones and stuff, but that made my insides hurt.
I know. It makes your area feel,
It's closed. It's closed right up. That.
yeah, mine sealed itself.
Yep.
Since doing this story, I was like, ugh. Yeah. How mad though, because at that time they honestly would have thought that there was a woman that was able to give birth to animals,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
Jeez.
Yeah. So, how do you like them apples?
I didn't. I didn't like that
Oh,
one bit.
no, it's rank, isn't it?
Yeah, really, really rank.
Well, you're welcome.
Thanks.
Well,
Oh, we
I've
should
got
get
I've
another.
I've got DMs to clean, so I'm going to love you and leave you all. I've got to go and dye my hair as well before I go on the school run.
All right. Thanks, though.
You're welcome. I'll see you all next time.
See ya.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
If you have enjoyed listening to our episodes, make sure you rate us and leave us a review on whatever platform you are listening.
We absolutely love hearing from you guys. So you can also help support our show by donating to our Buy Me a Coffee link. We will make sure that you get a massive shout out and a big thank you in our next week's episode.
You can also follow us on social media at Perplexed Podcasts. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and if you want to see more videos and blooper reels, subscribe to our TikTok and YouTube channels.
You can also email us your stories at perplexedpodcasts@gmail.com.
And you can find all the relevant links in the episode descriptions. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.
Just thinking I should have saved some of the random blams for the next episode, really.
I'll cut some out.
No, I'm out.
Yeah.
Used them all up.
Blamed yourself right out.
A rookie error.